Torin Beasley. He is an adjunct professor at the Corcoran College of Art and Design, but also, and maybe more important at this point, vice president of Seabury Design and Communications. He has a long career in news as a journalist. He spent 18 years as a managing editor at Newhouse News Service, it basically has been involved in creating art to accompany journalism in a variety of places for many years. And so he's going to talk to us today about how to improve the photographic and digital elements that we're adding to our stories. And I think he's somewhat flexible in terms of answering your questions and talking to you about what is going to be most important to you, but also has a presentation. And you have a full bio of him in your packet, so please take some time to read that, because Torin is somebody who comes to us with tremendous talent and a lot of experience, and I'm really very grateful that he was going to be here today. So Torin, take it away.
Wow, that's better than I've felt in a long time. Thank you. One thing I will just tell everybody, because of just the way we're sitting here right now, that I am totally interruptible, okay? So anytime you feel like you have a question, or you want to jump in, or you want to make a point, or you just feel anything, just go ahead and do that, because when it comes to the creative side, everything is a good topic of discussion, okay? I think that it's really important when you talk. I'm just going to, by the way, that's not a presentation I have, that's just 4 photos, and I'm going to use them just to talk about certain elements within a photo. But what I find as I talk to journalists about photography is that there is this sense that photography is somehow different from when you're reporting and writing. And it's really not. The whole idea behind a photo is to do exactly what the idea behind a story is. It's not just to present facts, but to create this sense of understanding these images in people's minds. Okay? It is, and I use this, and Raina will know this, when I talk about the idea of the intersection between subject and circumstance. Okay, that's my mantra. Whenever I teach photography, or when I talk about what photography does, I talk about this intersection between subject and circumstance, because that's where every story starts. That's where every truth comes from. It comes from this place where value systems clash, where circumstances force people to make decisions and carry the human experience forward. And what we do as reporters, whether it's editorially or visually, is really give people experiences. So what I want to do, and what I think is a good idea for everybody to do when they think about their story, is think about it in terms of the experience. So now when you write about it, you'll recognize, when you think about it in terms of the experience, you'll recognize the experience that you're trying to give people who read your work. And then carry that to the next stage, and you'll start to think about the experience that you're trying to give people who see what you're presenting them with. So in a way, what photography is giving people an opportunity to literally see what you mean. And that's a very important point. They have to see what you mean. So there has to be meaning in the imagery, which means that the imagery has to be thought about, the story has to be thought about, and those decisions then will point you in the direction of what kind of photograph you want to take, how you want to accompany that story, how you want to put both the editorial and the visual together. Now, one thing that's interesting fact that's probably little known, is that people respond to imagery 60,000 times faster than text. And there's a reason for that, because we're wired to be visual people. Visual stimuli makes us move. When you walk down the street, if you start to chart yourself from the time you wake up in the morning and every experience you have, when you walk in the door, when you walk down the street, you're always casing the joint. And the reason why is because what human beings want to know is it safe to be here? I mean, if you pay that much attention like I do, you probably freak out every time you walk in. You go, oh, is this safe? Is that safe? Is this going? It's that kind of thing. But that's what we respond to, is that kind of stimuli. So when you're taking a picture, before people have the time to have you explain and fill in the details, when you're taking a picture, you want to isolate the truth in the picture that represents the part of the story that you're going to tell. Another thing, and I get in arguments about this all the time, is that I don't believe, and especially visually, that anybody in one opportunity to tell a story tells the whole truth. I think they only tell a truth, and it is the combination of putting together of all of those truths that gives everybody the information they need to make proper decisions. A good example for me is that whenever I read a story in one outlet, I go to 5 or 6 or 7 other outlets to see what everybody else is saying, because I want to put together all of those different truths. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because the next part of this is that in photography especially, you make a decision about what truth you're going to tell as it relates to the story that you're telling. So you have to be really, really conscious about the decisions that you're making to tell the story. So that's the decision that you're making to take the picture. So that brings us to the things that kind of, that really do make up what a picture is. You know, focus is one thing. If we don't know what we're looking at, then our audience doesn't know what we're looking at. You know, good example. I know you guys have done this. Anybody who's taking a picture has done this. You see a beautiful sunset, and you put the camera up there, and you take the picture, and you think it's amazing, and then when you actually see the photo, the sun is way back there, and it's not at all what you thought you were looking at, because the sun is so far away. Well, what that is being able to pay attention to how your eyes work, because everybody who's looking at your image, their eyes work the same way. What your eyes do is focus selectively on the most important thing to you, the thing that has the greatest emotional impact, the thing that provides the most stimuli, the thing that tells you most, gives you the most information about what you're looking at. So when you're looking at that sunset, your eyes actually grab the sun and the horizon and they bring it to you, because you're saying, I want to study this. So you have to remember when you're taking pictures that, especially with lenses on these cameras, that they're not doing that. What the lens is doing is showing you just the field of vision. You're the one that's actually selecting. So your cameras, your phones, your smartphones, they have these little things called zooms, right? And what the zoom allows you to do, and on an iPhone, you know, you just pinch, you just go like this, you spread, and it allows you to bring the information closer to you. So that when you look at the scene, you say, I'm not looking at all of this. I'm looking at just this part, so you can zoom in. But what happens with the zoom in an iPhone, and with any other camera, quite frankly, is that as soon as you increase the magnification, you actually amplify certain other effects. And the other effect that you amplify can be as simple as your heartbeat. And you get camera shake. So the tighter you get on something, the more shake you get, right? So now you got a focus problem. Because if the camera is shaking, when you go to take this picture, then everything's moving, picture's out of focus, you don't get what you need. There are neat little things, and you can go to this site, you might want to write it down, called photojojo.com. Have you ever, any of you ever heard of that?
PHOTO or
PHOTO, Jojo, JOJO.com. And on PhotoJojo, there are a lot of these neat little things that will help you with stuff like camera shake. There are tripods. There's even, if you have to do video, there's a video rig. I think it's about $139, somewhere in that area, maybe a little more. There's a video rig that you can actually outfit your smartphone with so that you can take better video. What there also is a selection of lenses that you can use so that you don't have to rely on your iPhone lenses. Okay? Those lenses will attach right here over the camera, and they're telephoto lenses. You can even see that big lens Raina's got there. There's even an adapter to put one of those Canon lenses on your iPhone.
Oh my god.
So if you really want to get slick, spend a little money and take care of those things. But those are the things that are going to help you really focus your vision. Little accessories that'll help you, like tripods and monopods, and ways to stabilize the iPhone if that's what you're going to do, so that if you do use the in-camera zoom, you won't get that shake and have that problem. And then there are other things like actual lenses and video rigs where you can actually, there's even an adapter, I think Sony makes one, that you put the adapter over the front here and then this becomes a camera back for you so that you can actually see what you're shooting through the back. So those are little things that are going to help you. But let's go back to what's important in a good photo. Focus is going to be important in a good photo. Composition and composition is just the most important thing that you need to pay attention to. What's in the photo. So it makes sense when if you remember the way your eyes work and how selective your eyes are, it makes sense before you actually take the photo to actually look around the frame to see what's in there. Because a lot of times you don't notice it, but there's a pole behind somebody, and that pole looks like it's sticking right out of their head, you know? Or there's something else in the way that takes away from the impact that your picture might have. So composition is going to be really important. Has anybody heard of the rule of thirds? Mm-hmm. Things are more interesting in either part of the third than they are static. As soon as people's eyes see a static image, you got about 2 seconds and they're gone. Because they recognize static stuff right in the middle. There's no interest, there's nothing else to look at. And when you think about composition, you also think about line. And you also think about textures. So if there are things within the background of the frame that form lines that point to your subject or point to what it is you want people to see, the eyes are going to follow those things. So when you start to pay attention to just how your eyes work, just how you respond to stimuli, you can add that stuff to how you take pictures, and you'll have much more successful images. The other thing is that understanding how color works is going to help you. Bright colors move forward, dark colors move back. So one big mistake we make when we think about the use of color, bright colors and dark colors, is whenever we have to do a headshot, what's the first thing we do? We smash somebody up against a wall. So you have this bright white wall. We look for the white wall, and we take their picture, and what happens is the white wall actually starts coming forward, and it flattens everything out, so the picture looks horrible, because the lightness of the wall is coming forward. What you want to do is move somebody away from the wall. Because when you move them away from the wall, what starts to happen there is this law called the law of inverse squares starts to take effect. You know what that is? Where when you double the distance, you half the light. So all of a sudden, a lit background that's a white wall, if they're right up against it, and then you move them twice the distance that they were, 2 feet, 4 feet, however, what happens is that wall no longer is white. It starts to turn gray. And the reason why it starts to turn gray is because half of the amount of light that was on it when you were right in front of it is on it when you move people away from it. That's the way the camera sees it, okay? So then that starts to turn gray. But when you move them away from the wall, what you want to try to do is move them into a new light source. And light sources are important because the next most important thing about photography, that's actually the most important thing about photography, is that it uses light. That's your brush. So the light needs to be where your subject is, not behind your subject, not over there, but where your subject is, and you have to expose for that. A lot of people think, well, what I'll do in order to replace the light is use the flash. Terrible flashes on these things. Wouldn't do it. It looks horrible. I'm sure you've all had that experience, right? Aside from, well, these are LEDs, so it's cold light. You know, you're not going to be able to, you know, I've seen people do little things like where the flashlight comes in, put a tiny little piece of filter paper.
Yeah, like a gel.
Yeah, like a little gel. Yeah, exactly, a real little mini gel.
Like a really warm
Right,
gel.
to change the quality of the light, but most of you aren't going to do that, right? You're not going to cut mini gels and walk around with a gel pack or anything like that. Well, let me get my gel pack. So what I would recommend is that you just stay away from it, okay? And on Photo Jojo, there's this thing, there are these constant sources of LED light that you can plug into your little headphone jack, and when you plug it into your headphone jack, you know, you get this constant source of light. That's probably not that good either, because when you think about regular cameras, and I'm sure you guys are aware of them, if you use a regular SLR, what you get is when the camera has flash mounted on the top, it flattens the image as, because direct light is going to push everything back, so it's going to flatten your image. So if you have anything that's on your camera and you use it to take a picture, it's going to flatten everything and make it look kind of ugly. So since you can't take it off your camera, it's better that you go ahead and use your camera in an existing light situation, and then make some choices about the light. And the law of inverse squares is part of the choice that you're going to make, that you want to move them away from a very bright background and move them forward so that that background starts to fall away, okay? Using your zoom a little bit, or at least, you know, what I like to use what I call the foot zoom, where I actually like walk towards the person. You know what I mean? As opposed to like going like this, you know, and changing the quality of the image that way. I use the foot zoom. So I just I walk over there, you know. And you'll find that's a very effective technique. And when they ask you where you're going, just say foot zoom. Okay, that's all they need to say. That's all you need to know. Foot zoom, you know, and then they can watch how great your pictures look when they show up in the publication. But the other piece of it is, once you get to the position where you can frame a picture, there are choices that you can make with your, and I'm most familiar with the iPhone, but with your smartphone, that will help you take a great picture. And those choices change the exposure, okay? And that's what I want to kind of, let's see here. Where did that?
You're up in the upper right corner.
I see. Trying to get away from you now. So, just double click.
Yeah, sure can.
I'm a Mac person, so forgive me if I get totally lost. Can you do two at once? Can we show them side by side or no? That's upside down.
Very sensitive.
It's upside down.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
All right, let me just move this to get the other one. You want photo two open
Yeah.
at the same time? Is that upside down
Yes,
too?
it is.
Okay, so, and you want me to make these smaller?
Yeah,
So that
so
we can,
I can see them. Well,
Florida.
Looks like it.
is that Florida?
Yeah.
No. You know what it is? It's Solomon's Island, off of the Chesapeake Bay.
Oh.
Yeah, see? Looks like Florida.
how's that?
Yeah. Oh, you
Sorry.
had it. Okay, this is good. And what I want to talk a little bit about is exposure, because these two were taken with an iPhone, okay? And what happens is you have these different areas in the image, even though they look similar, which one looks more dramatic of the two?
The bad.
This one or this one? The differences are in the exposure and the choice that you make in an iPhone to get that exposure, okay? You can choose to expose for this area here. That's going to give you one look. You can choose to expose for this area here, which means the camera is going to, when you tap on it, when you use your iPhone, do all of you have iPhones, or most of you have iPhones? I'll show you something. My iPhone is so beat up.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so as you look in your viewfinder of your iPhone, whatever you're deciding to take a picture of, if you tap in a certain area, the iPhone will expose for that area and focus, and that's going to change your image dramatically. So if you choose, what I chose here was to expose for the brightest part of the image. So what that did was bring this orange into the proper exposure, and it's like a zone system. Have you Ever heard of the zone system? The zone system is where, and you can use this, a modified zone system. What it allows you to do is to choose the area of the image that you want to be a certain way, whether it's in terms of the exposure itself, or whether it's your black is black or your white is white with detail. Well, for the iPhone, it's just the area that's going to have the exposure. And what happens is everything else will fall into place around that zone. So it's really an easy way to come up with amazing exposures and amazing pictures by just choosing where your exposure is going to be. Okay? So if you choose this area back here, then all of a sudden everything comes out from this area. So the reds get deep, the blacks get black, the detail in the sky turns a richer blue, and because of this you get this real graphic effect here. You get the red sort of exposure in a much more tightly controlled area. If you choose an area where you're dealing with more sky, like this area here or over here, then what you're going to get is a lighter photo, because these details are going to be more visible to you, because that's what you're exposing for. Okay? So depending on what you need in the image, you make your exposure based on that. So let's turn on light for a second. So if you look at my face, for example, and if you see a highlight on my face, and you put your iPhones up, and there's a bright light on one part of my face, and you tap just on that part of my face, if you can say I'm trying to put myself in the way, I'm not sure if that happened. but when that happens, then you'll see how the rest of the room changes based on the exposure that you're making. So when you're and the reason why I bring this up, because if you're at a press conference, if you are making decisions at a press conference with your iPhone, usually that person is standing by a light, and the light is brighter on one side than it is on the other. So you can make choices all around that person's head till you get to the one that works, that looks best for you. Does that make sense?
Question,
Yes.
is that different? I mean, I'm sure it is, but I'm trying to figure out how. So with the new operating system on the iPhone, there's that little sort of Venn diagram of colors. Are you familiar with this?
I've seen it, but I use it for
So on my camera, I can choose,
Those are just filters.
I can touch my little Venn diagram, and it gives me all these choices of different exposures.
Yeah, you can make that choice, but
That's different from choosing a part of the
Yeah,
image.
because what I'm talking about is going right there,
Right,
you know?
right.
Because it does two things. It tries to give you an aperture that's going to keep a lot of things in focus, but it also changes. You see that?
Yes.
See, when you click on her, how the room did like that, and now that's what we're talking about. That's your main piece,
Right.
is the exposure that you want to make. So if you want to do the table, then you see how everything changes around it.
Right.
Okay? Then you can, if you wanted to use that other piece, you can do that supplementally. But,
Yeah.
but
This almost seems like a filter, like different.
Oh, those are Instagram
right,
filters.
those are, yeah,
They are
that's what that
I mean,
is. Yeah.
Instagram
So
Live.
it's a
Yeah.
filter.
So,
I'm still playing with my new.
yeah, no, that's okay. And some of the applications that I've given you a list of will help you with some of the other things that we'll talk about. But essentially what I'm talking about is how to break out your iPhone, point it at a scene, make a choice so that you create this contrast in the imagery that you need to make it as dynamic as it's going to be, and then hit the button. Now, a lot of people are stuck on this button right here for taking the picture, but you don't need that button because these buttons up here work.
That's right, I forgot.
Yeah. So, you know, because I watch people all the time, once they're on photo, they go and they set it up and then they move their finger to take the picture. And if you set your camera up so that you've got your volume buttons at the top, you can actually take the picture using the volume buttons. Yeah.
That tip alone has made your visit worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes your life a lot easier, you know?
I have a
Then your
question.
fingers out of the way. Yes.
If I'm taking your picture here, how Is it always better to have a tight focus because you see more of the person speaking, or how do you decide when to move back and have more space in the photo?
Well, that's a good point. Okay, so well, not at the pulpit, but pretend I'm a speaker,
Yeah.
and you're taking my picture, right? Now I'm speaking, and if you guys have been paying attention to me, you notice I speak with my hands quite a bit. I'm always doing like this and pointing at you and doing that kind of stuff. So don't get mad. I'm not singling you out. But in any case, so you got to think about the idea of interest. What will make people respond to this picture more intensely? So if you have a guy who's just standing there and he's going, well, it's this, it's that, it's this, the budget was this much this year, and we spent more than that, and we're going to try not to do that again. And I don't know. Anyway, if you got... No, but anyway, so if you've got that kind of person, then the only thing you're going to have from them is head and shoulders, right? So what's going to make that more interesting? Well, it's better than if you're getting something where they turn to look at somebody else and their mouth is open like they're saying something, they turn over here. That's more exciting than just this head-on shot when they're not speaking, you know? Because photos really are about things that are happening. You know, times that are happening, experiences that are happening, as opposed to one that just passed. You know, so if a guy speaks with his hands a lot like I do, then you're going to have much better opportunities for a wider image, because this person's going to be doing this, he's going to be doing that, he's going to be doing that, or she's going to be doing that. They're going to be talking, they're going to be making people laugh, they're going to do all kinds of things that are going to make it interesting. And what happens there when you have a photo like that is people get a sense of who that person is. And that's what you want. You don't want just to have a picture that says, you know, Torrin was a speaker,
Right.
you know, but what kind of speaker was he? I mean, at the very least, what kind of speaker was he, you know? And even if you're taking reaction photos in the room, you know, how are people reacting, and what truth about how they're reacting can you tell? So if I've made people laugh, you know, 40 times during the course of a presentation, and you don't have a photo that shows that, then you kind of like missed it. You know what I mean? And your readers will too, you
Right.
know? So if I do this a lot, and you don't have a photo of me doing that, then you kind of missed it in your story, you know, and your readers will too. So, and that kind of takes us back to where, you know, where you want your readers to be. What truth do you want to tell about an event? It's not just about being at that event and just sending back a picture. It's really about sending back a truth about that event, you know, and what kinds of images would really, really do that. You know, that I think is the most important thing. Yes?
So if we take a picture on our phone and we're sending it back to a newspaper to print, like
Mhm.
in the paper product,
Mm-hmm.
can we zoom in? Like, I mean, I thought, I'm not sure why I thought it, but that if you zoom in before you take the photo, it lessens the something.
Well, we talked about camera shake and those
Right,
kinds
but
of
even
things.
if it doesn't shake in you, or even doing it on a tripod, but even if you zoom in, is it
Maybe digital
like,
versus optical zoom.
Yeah, but well, there's a limit. Okay, you don't want to take it and bring it all the way to the limits of the zoom in the iPhone, because you're going to be in trouble. But yes, you can zoom in just a hair to
Okay.
get things in
Can
a
you-
good place without
Can you
doing
like
that.
can you like move your fingers like what a hair is? Like you don't even have to do it on the iPhone. Like can you just like
You're asking me about that?
I know
Come
that's
on,
ridiculous,
folks.
but I think that that'll explain it. Like
Sure.
because I've never zoomed, even though it probably would have enhanced a photo because I thought that it would.
Well, there's two things you can do. First, let me just put you at ease in one way. There's zoom and then there's crop. You
Right.
know, but you still need to be close enough. And in order to avoid the problems that you have with digital zoom, you use my method of zoom. Foot zoom. Meaning
Sorry, what?
Foot
Foot
zoom.
zoom.
Oh right.
Meaning you actually walk up there and do this. Okay? But if you were to zoom at all, I don't know if you can see this, you know, it's really not much. It's just
Like
enough.
that much, okay,
Yeah.
that
It's
was-
not,
yeah.
it's really not much.
Okay, and that's not
You
going
know,
to.
it shouldn't
photo
affect.
editor
It
won't say
shouldn't
we
have
can't
that.
do
It
this.
shouldn't have that much of an effect on it at all. Test it though, you know. And that's like when I was learning photography. we all heard this adage that film is cheap. Well, it's even cheaper digitally. You know what I mean? So for you, when you go ahead, just do a test.
Mhm.
Just, you know, if you got a cat, a dog, a vase, whatever it is, go up to it, take it out wide like that, you know, zoom a little bit, see what you can get away with, and then see what shows up. And this is, I don't know if you have the opportunities to look at the things that, you know, you do online, because, you know, a lot of the photos that come from our phones actually go online.
Mhm.
And online, the resolution is real low. It's 72 dpi. So if you do a little bit of quote unquote over zooming and you send them a full size image, by the time they reduce it, you know, it tends to work out okay.
Okay.
But for print, you always want to send them the full size image. And how many of you actually have iPhone photos published in print?
In a breaking situation.
Yeah. Okay. So to me, you know, if you're going in print, and print still is only what, 110 lines per inch. It's not a lot. I mean, it's not like high def, not like a television, you know. And did you hear, by the way, a little aside, that they, you know, 1080p used to be the holy grail of definition in televisions, and now they've gone to 4K. Wow. That's really, I know. It's like they'll be walking out of the set at your house. But getting back to affecting the sharpness and of your image, you know, the best thing to do is to walk up to it. And that's the thing that most of us are most afraid of doing. Just walk up to it and make sure that it's in, you know, it fills your field. Like, you know, for me, I have choices. You know, when I'm looking here, I wanted to take if I want to take a picture of one of you, I can do this, or I can get a better picture by doing that and tapping there and then using my top button, and I got a much better picture than I would have if I'm way out here, you know? So you gotta do it. It works for you too. It does, yeah. That works for everybody. And I think that's something that, you know, you should really think about first. How do you get yourself in position to take the best pictures? And in today's digital world, with these little cameras, with their limited, you know, fields, of vision, the best thing is foot zoom. That's why I say it's the only thing you need to know when it comes to taking these pictures. That's getting yourself in position to get the better picture. So you try to get to the front of the room, you try to get as close as possible. Another thing you can do that would help people see what you want is that in situations where there's a crowd and there's someone talking, you have an opportunity to frame, using the crowd as the bottom part of the frame, or using, you know, depending on how the crowd is set up. Because if you tap for your exposure at the place where your subject is, remember everything else, and we can look at these other two images.
Yeah,
Do the same thing. Sort of the same situation. I'll just give you two new views to look at. You have to rotate that. And then the other one. Notice I'm not pretending these are news photos because I didn't want to get into an argument about what's news and what's not. But once again, you can see the difference in the choices and how they, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because look at the detail in the middle portion here, as opposed to how that happens here, based on what you expose on. Because you really have, in areas, in photos, you have physical areas where you're talking about foreground, midground, and background, but you also have exposure areas where you talk about highlights, midtones, and darks, okay? The average camera, and it's the same is true for your iPhones, is calibrated to make an exposure around 18% gray. And that's what's called neutral gray, okay? So that's why if you just take a picture and you don't tap an area, what you get is this flat image. Because what it does is it tries to take measurements from all around the frame and average them together based on neutral gray. And this is another one of my mantras that I know has been heard before, and that's beating your equipment into submission. And that's the idea that you are in control of the equipment, so you have to exercise that control in order for you to get a good image. So when you look at these, you have highlights, you have midtones, and you have darks. You see all those three areas? And every time you change your exposure, you affect how those things turn out. So if you start with a gray photo and you expose with the midtones, then you get the midtones in here, anything that's a little darker, but you still have the detail here, and you get your blacks around it. If you expose for the highlights, then everything else is underexposed. And so now everything goes really dark. The midtones get darker, the blacks get darker, and those areas that were in the shadows start to lose their detail.
Can you just explain where you touched on the photo on the left to get that exposure?
Right in here.
Okay.
So that what I got is, the average here. This is going to be blown out because it's not in the equation. This was the highlight. This is more defined here. You see that?
And you touched this on
I
there.
touched this. Now there are things that are outside of the capability of film or any digital product to reproduce, because it just everything has a range. Film has a range. There are certain tones that film can produce. So when we talk about the tonal range, what we're talking about is the area of the whitest white with no detail, which would be this, right? To the area of the blackest black with no detail, which is somewhere down in here or over in here. So the decisions that are made when people put together cameras is to sort of average all of this, so you get kinda everything in there. But anything that's extreme is not going to show up. And if you look at the difference, look how much more detail there is here, right, in this bright area than there is here. Because of the choice to expose for here, it picked up all of this and all of this detail back in here. This became much richer, but then I lost these things, right? I lost the detail here. Here, we made a decision to be more of an average, so we exposed for the sky. So the sky formation is there, though not quite as dramatic, and certainly not as rich, right? You see the difference? These clouds look a lot meaner here. These are like God clouds, here. And these, just kind of like, we're clouds, But here is the detail. So if I want people to really be able to pay attention to the detail here, then I make choices that affect that. If I'm more about the dramatic effect of the sunset and and all the other stuff, then I make the choice that gives me that drama by focusing here. So that's what we mean by the zone, because what happens is you choose a zone and you say, I want people to see this way. That's the decision that you're making, and you got to be conscious about it, because it's not a mistake. It is a decision that you make on purpose. Whenever you hit the shutter, that's a decision that you made on purpose. Let me decline that. Sorry. I'm sorry. I meant to turn that off before I came in here. So whenever you have that, whenever you hit the shutter, that's a decision that you made on purpose. So what we really want to do is make sure that we're conscious of all that. Just like in our writing. When you're writing stories, you make all the decisions on purpose. You're trained to do that. The same thing carries over into your photos, that you're making these decisions on purpose. Nothing is really an accident. We might use that as an excuse when we have a bad photo, but nothing is really an accident, okay? So this is how it works. You have areas from the brightest bright with no detail to the blackest black with no detail, and you have everything in between. So the choice that you're going to make is which area you want to expose for, because once you make that choice, then it's like the butterfly effect. Everything else follows behind it. And the great thing about digital photography is that you can see it immediately. Back in the day, we had to wait, right? So we would just bracket and bracket and bracket and bracket and bracket and go half stops down the line and half stops up the line, and then when we process the film, we would see what we had. But here, you can make the choice and see the results instantly. So I would suggest that everybody go ahead and practice that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the apps that we have, and I want to take some questions too. Any questions that you might have? So I put together this little list, and we can talk about not just how you take them, but now how you deliver them. Is anybody familiar with FTP? File Transfer Protocol. These new names are amazing, right? Well, that's one of the things that, it's kind of amazing how there's been a whole sort of culture now that's starting to develop around using the iPhones, and there are some photo departments now, and I don't know if you've heard of this, but some newspapers are just doing away with the SLRs and actually just giving everybody an iPhone. Let me just take a sip. What is that?
Sounds like a terrible idea.
Well,
I remember when they did away with film and everybody had to move to digits.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
I remember when they did away with black and white and everybody had to move to color. That was a big deal. I'm older than she is. But yeah, all these changes are amazing. But interestingly enough, though, the one thing that has not changed and will not change, and actually I should read this to you because this is really what it's all about. This is one of the Newhouse newspapers. It's only fitting that I should choose one of them. Wrote a little piece on December 31st about this idea of digital SLRs versus iPhones and all that stuff that's changing. And they said, we've been pouring over a year's worth of photojournalism here at the Oregonian in an attempt to cull our best moments from 2013 to share with you. In the doing and along the way, we've uncovered a few thoughts. There's a lot of talk these days in photography circles and beyond about iPhones versus real cameras and citizen journalists replacing photojournalists. And while it's clear we're deep in a sea change of how it all works, there's one thing we hope doesn't get lost in the cacophonous conversations. We're only going to say this once, so listen and repeat. It's not about the camera. Whether it's an iPhone, a state-of-the-art DSLR, or your daddy's Polaroid, the success of a photograph rises or falls in large part depending on who is behind that camera. No doubt luck plays a role, albeit a small one, but great photography is mostly this: a feel for timing that is both decisive and nimble, the ability to anticipate actions and events, which involves an understanding of subject matter along with an instinctive grasp of human nature, and in the case of photojournalism, where the story is king, an ability to earn the trust, often on the fly, of the powerful, the powerless, and everyone in between. Then I just got to give them their due because they patted themselves on the back, so I have to discredit it. Oregonian staff photographers know how to bring it. And remember, the goods they bring are not material, but internal. The results, a sampling of what you see here, speak for themselves. That really is the most powerful part of this whole process. That more than the equipment, it's really you. It's really the storyteller. And I believe that journalists as a whole, and for me, photographers in particular, are superhuman in that respect. They're like superheroes. Because what we're able to do is access human experience and stories that affect human experience and then bring it to people in a way that they get something from it. And to carry that power across media, from whether you're just writing a story to when you're visually giving people an experience, is probably the most incredible thing that anybody could do. So when I talk about photography, I'm more on the gospel end, on the religious. The experience of having people respond to what they see, to what I've made conscious decisions about putting together, is just unbelievable. It's amazing. And I know that that's what reporters really get from seeing the byline. It's not that your name is there, but it's that you've been able to bring this experience to people. Now is an incredible new time in the history of newspapers where people get to join all of their experience in a creative effort. But it's that one concentrated effort to really document mankind and to move mankind forward because of the experiences that we're able to give them. That is powerfully important. And so as you approach photojournalism or journalism or picture taking, you need to approach it with the same passion that you do your work. What is it about this story beforehand, you know, that makes it so exciting? How do I access that, not just in terms of my editorial skill, but in terms of what experiences there are visually that people can have, so I can marry the two in a way nobody else can, to bring them the truth that I'm experiencing in this particular place at this time with this story. That kind of focus, I believe, helps you really do what storytellers were meant to do. And we're all that. We're all storytellers. And this time, again, in history is a time when storytellers are being asked to bring all of their skills together and make it all work in one package. So that's pretty amazing stuff. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question, sort of a philosophical question.
Sure.
The upside of what you're describing is that, if a newspaper gives everybody the charge to take photos occasionally, and we all become a little bit better at it than we were before, the pool, the odds of getting the right images that day or that month or whatever are higher. But I've worked with a lot of staff photographers over the years, and they are so good at, amazingly good. Everybody's good, or maybe a lot better than I am as a writer and a reporter. So the idea that I'm going to take this camera out there and somehow or another replace that kind of lifetime of experience is pretty hubristic.
Well, and I'm not suggesting that you're going to replace that person. What I'm talking about is your experience at your time,
Right.
in that moment, in that story, because the other guy's not there.
Right.
So we're not talking about competition.
Well, I wasn't talking so much to challenge what you're saying, but as newspapers are devaluing the other media, devaluing having a full staff of dedicated, it's as if everybody could go out and do it. You're a storyteller, go tell the story, video, audio, but not everybody's as good at everything.
Well, they're not. But here's one thing that is really interesting to me. When you look at the history of newspapers themselves were never founded with the idea of supporting visuals. That wasn't the point of newspapers. That visuals only came into play when around the Civil War, right? And the real reason was nobody could show death like Brady could, and all of the death around the Civil War is what started to help people, photographers and editors come together, editorial people come together. But what this has done is, what this era has done, is said that it's created a separation where really people are creating their own markets. So whether you work as a staff reporter or not, you're still a storyteller. And you're going to supplement your powers with other minor powers, in your case if you're a writer,
Right.
and then you add the photo to it. Photographers are in the same position right now. Well, to me, I think a better position, because I think that in the growth of newspapers, because photography was always considered supplemental. We always had to supplement our storytelling ability to what the story was based on someone else's vision for the story. That's not a bad thing. The good thing now, though, is that because of this change, photographers have become responsible for the whole package, for everything. So they get to really, really take, command from their perspective, using their special powers, and do that. And what that creates, I think, is really a good world for everybody, because what photographers now have to do is take their minor skill of writing and use that to make a better product. What reporters are doing is taking their minor skill of photography and use that to create a better product. So I kind of see it working well for everybody, you know, and it's not a question of, you know, it's not being hubristic in that respect. It's just saying, hey, we're putting it all together now. But if you're going to put it together, then you got to do it with the same passion, because what you want to get out of yourself is the best that you have. Yes.
I've been in the position before of having to photograph an event and report on it in the same time. And one of the biggest challenges for me has been, okay, I'm off taking photos of whatever's going on. I've got my notebook, you know, in my pocket or in my backpack somewhere. Some quote happens that I really wanted to take down.
You missed it.
I missed it. I'm busy taking photos.
Right.
How do you balance, you know, if you are going to take more photos for the articles that you're writing, how do you balance that role, that dual role that was traditionally filled by a photographer who just had one job and you had just one job?
With also writing your story and live filing it and live tweeting it and taking pictures for all of it.
Yeah.
With captions on
Yeah.
pictures.
Quickly.
You
Yeah.
why?
No, those are actually great questions. And I think you'll find inherent in doing each one of those jobs that there is a best time to do each. And so what it requires is research on your part ahead of time to be able to separate as much as you can what the good photo opportunities are from what the good editorial opportunities are. And often you can illustrate a story and not use the photos that are available when you're just interviewing somebody. Like, let's take a protest, for example. Say if somebody is going to speak and there's going to be a huge protest, and you want to be there to cover that speech and the story of the protest, because that's partly why the protest is taking place. Well, when does the protest begin, and when will that end? You can get pictures of that, usually, before the person starts speaking or afterwards. And you can walk in the room, and when the person comes up to the podium and first opens his mouth, pow, you got that done. You can think about that. So you got that done. Cover your story. Then you go outside at the end of the speech, and after you've gotten the quotes that you need, and you take the images of the protest, and you illustrate your story with the protest. The story is about the protest. Because the image of the guy talking is secondary. The human reaction to what the subject are the primary photos. So if you take that story and you break it out in terms of what's most important, both on the editorial side and then on the visual side, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of time, you'll find that you can handle both without having to jumble it and do it quickly.
It's kind of an ethical question. If you're looking at, you know, in the modern digital age, there's a lot of editing software out there. There's a lot of opportunities to change sometimes significant aspects of your photo before it hits the publication. Where do you draw the line in terms of Photoshop, stuff like that? What's your own sort of guidelines for that?
Well, there's one major guideline. If it isn't real, just tell people that, and then you've avoided any of the ethical issues. You know, like, and that's one of the things that used to come up a lot. If you remove somebody's head, just make it extreme, then what you have to tell people is that this is a photo illustration. It's not real. I removed his head. You know.
I didn't do that in real life.
You know, right? You know, but chances are you're not going to go that far. But when you deal with ethics, essentially correcting the photo to give the photo the feel that it had, what you saw, what you want people to know, is not unethical. Okay, we've been doing that forever and ever. And I teach photo classes, and a lot of people say, well, I'm a purist. I don't you know, post-produce photos. Well, that's not being a purist. There's no photographer who's a real photographer in the history of the world that doesn't tone their photos before they have people see them. So toning is fine. Where the problem comes in is if you are doing things to tell people something that didn't happen or that wasn't true or is beyond the idea of what the image was initially about, and you don't tell them.
Or even like, let's say in the protest example, if you're covering something at the same time and you have, you're covering this big speech that was going on at the protest, and then you have photos of somebody giving a reaction, and it looks like in the context of the story, it looks like they're reacting to the speech, even though you took that photo before the speech went down. Would that be something that you could pair with that article, and that's fair?
Sure, because that image is an image of the protest.
Yeah.
It is within the realm of the event.
Okay.
But if you did that 2 days later,
Yeah.
now you got an issue. But if the event started at this point, ended at that point, had a speech in the middle, and you have images that deal with the protest, and you're captioning them as such, and the image of the speech, then you're good.
But I would just add to that I do think it's important that your caption is specific enough so as not to be misleading.
Yeah.
You know, if
so
you're-
people react to the speech. as opposed to-
Right.
Well, no, it would be
Yeah.
before this, but yeah, exactly. That's why I say you caption it so
Yeah.
they know, you know.
Right, especially, if
Yeah.
your lead is something like, the protest leader really pissed people off
Yeah.
yesterday when he said X.
But this was before that.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
so
No, you don't want
gotta
that.
speak here.
But the caption, as long as people know what's going on, then you're good. But if you mislead people, that's when you really have issues. Yes.
I think you answered it.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Quick question just on the altering photos, not altering, but
Sure.
toning, things like that. So in your eyes, it's okay to give us a picture that's a little too dark, to adjust the lightness
Sure.
or adjust the saturation.
Sure.
Because I never know sometimes.
Yeah, because that's mechanical. You know what I'm saying? And one of the things that has always been an issue with photographers is going ahead and correcting for the mechanical issues. That's why photography is a process. It's not just that. It doesn't stop the moment you click
That's what you guys did in the dark.
photo. Right. That's what we did in the darkroom all the time. Because if you have something that's underexposed, people can't see it, right? You want them to see it, so you need to bring that out. So there is a level of toning that you can use, up to, and some would argue including, what we call hand of God burning and dodging, where it's pretty obvious that it's kind of heavy. I don't particularly subscribe to that school. I think that there's a point where you start doing things that actually change what the meaning of the image is beyond what it was. Even if you wanted to do it for emphasis, there's really only so much emphasis you can provide with post-processing. I think that if you find yourself in that kind of situation, what you really need to look at is your angle, is your composition, because what happens with photography is you're the person that arranges everything in a photo. And there's just no getting away from the fact that you're the person who's making the decisions. There's no getting away from that. There's no such thing as objectivity. It all comes through a filter, and it's all your individual filters. So you're going to make those decisions. So you have to make decisions about how you approach a story in a photograph, that best tells the truth of the story, that particular truth that you want to tell.
In Dallas a couple years ago, there was an art museum exhibit that looked at all the impressionist paintings of the coast in France, how beautiful they were. And then it was also the dawn of photography about the same time. And they actually found photos of the same beach scenes, right? And the photos would be like this little patch of, vacation land, but then all kinds of like commercialized billboards, just like you'd see at Jersey Shore now. And, the artists, the painters, Monet and all that, they didn't include all that clutter. But the photos did, and they didn't because they wanted to present an idealized. But it gets at what a photographer's job, I guess, is to present the actual what it really looked like.
Well,
which was a really different kind of thing.
That's a good point, but I find that when you look at the history of art, photography, like painting, is a mimetic art. It mimics, what it sees in front of it at minimum. But beyond that, you can do a lot of work with that. There's photo surrealism as well, and there are photographers who take and this is in the realm of art, but it has a different mission,
Right, but
has
not-
a different
not news
purpose,
photos.
right? Not news photos, and while there is a difference, just in terms of the purpose, I don't think that there's a difference in terms of the responsibility for a photographer being a person who knows their craft and knows what the communicating power of that craft is and uses it, to communicate. I think that, we all as artists, I think photographers are artists as well. I don't move photography out of the realm of fine art. And when you look at the history of art, you'll see that there's no need to, because the painters used camera obscuras at the dawn of painting to be able to reproduce scenes as accurately and exactly as possible. and then they moved to Impressionism. And why? And you can chart the growth and the change in painting based on the popularity of photography. You can see how the histories ride, together. There was no better way to reproduce more exactly a scene than what a photograph could do. So that spurred painting to move beyond just being mimetic and moving itself forward to starting to examine issues of psychology and issues of how color and how shape and how form and how impression as opposed to realism affects people. And so then you move into abstraction, which abstraction exists even in realism, in that what abstraction is an exercise in subtractive thinking. And what happens here, even you can use that too, as you work on your art, because what it means is to take out of the image all of those things that don't contribute to its meaning. So all the extraneous materials that you normally would have, or elements that you normally would have in an image because you're not paying attention, get abstracted, get taken out. You use that as an exercise in subtractive thinking, and they get taken out, and you end up with only the basic elements that mean the most to the people who are viewing them. So you watch painting grow, and you watch abstraction become an issue, and then you see that artists are solving these psychological issues of how to communicate with the depths of human emotion to get people to respond. And we learn a lot from that. And the new question now, and digital photography is bringing that up, is how photography then moves in that direction. What do we do as photographers to move forward? But backing up to the editorial piece, now you know all of this great stuff, right? So backing up to the editorial piece is your job then again is to use your powers, because as writers you do the same thing. You present us with elements that stir us, that make us respond intensely, to make us have an experience of what's going on. We visualize that. Then you add, the photos, and you subtract out all the extraneous stuff, so that's what editing does, right? It's just taking out all the extraneous stuff to keep us in the heart of the moment, in the heart of the experience of the story. You add that now, you add your photos to that, and you've just got this amazing, powerful piece. So everybody's moving in the same direction, and we've been doing it since the cave paintings. It's really that simple. So simple a cave painter can do it, right? Do you have any other? Yes.
I'd be kind of curious to get your thoughts on the sort of recent rise.
I got thoughts,
in popularity of GIF or GIF or however you say it, and cinemagraphs, and kind of the middle ground between the still photo and video, and how more news organizations are starting to use the moving pictures without sound to illustrate a point, and just kind of what you like about what you don't.
Well, to me, it's all an experiment. It's all an experiment, because when you look at everything, and this includes moving pictures, what is the base of the moving picture? The still image. I teach that at the Corcoran. You can't even get to video until you get to a still image. You can't walk into a place and just pick up a camera and say, "Hey, I'm a videographer." Until you understand photography, you can't do anything. And the still image is the base. That's why the frame rate is 30 frames per second. 30 individual images per second is what makes the thing move, So you still have to have this understanding of it. But you always have this thing where once people get involved in a certain piece of it, everybody wants to move, they want to be the kings of it. And they say, well, without me. But for me, it's all about art. It's all about communication. It's all about this ability to transmit, the human experience to other human beings and help them to chart, the course of humanity. That's what art has done, and it is the single thing in existence on this planet that has continually charted the course of human evolution. Art. Nobody makes a decision in their life without art. Everything you're wearing, you decided to wear because of the way it looked. It was designed for appeal. Every experience that you have, from food right on down the line, is because of art. It's all about how it looks, because it's designed to appeal to you in order to get you to buy it, partake of it, or have a certain kind of experience. So as I look at all of these things developing, I'm just happy. I'm just walking around here having a great time, because what it means is that we're getting better and better and better at translating, the human experience between, individuals.
I hope that GIFs die out like as soon as possible. I can't. They make me like.
They're gonna have
Is
a
that
place
what
though.
it's GIF, not? It's
Well, because it's
GIF.
no, it's GIF.
Graphic
It's graphic,
interface.
It's
Yeah.
GIF.
right? What does it stand for? Isn't it like graphic? Graphic.
Interchange something.
Like wait, but it is like graphic something something. So graphic. So.
Followed by
Get-
an I is a G.
Wait, I forget what
She just
I was
stumped
arguing.
herself.
I hate both of them.
I don't even know
But
what
they
it
can be
is.
done poorly and
Yes,
they can
you
be
do.
done
If
well.
you've seen
Well, and it's all going to end up being a part of something bigger. Is my point. That's what's going to happen. It's all going to end up being a part of something bigger and more amazing. You know, and I've seen videos, and I don't know if you guys, but you know, the Star Ledger is really good at experimenting and doing stuff. You know, video wise, and they did a video on it was called Gorilla Haiku, and it was this combination of still and movement that really used video to feel like a still image, you know, and it was just great the way they cut and divided the frame and they're doing, you know, a lot of really good things like that, but you know, it's just all part of something much bigger and better. This evolution that we're going through is really exciting.
Can I ask you, you talked earlier about the importance of composition
Mhm.
and about the rule of thirds.
Mhm.
Could you be a little bit more specific about how to compose a photograph? I mean, when you say rule of thirds, so your photo should have 3 sort of pieces, is that like foreground, mid,
No.
background, is it just?
No. Actually, yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. When we talk about the rule of thirds, we're talking about the position of the most important element in an image within the frame. Okay? So if you have this frame that's around me, I'm either in the center, or I'm going to be in this third of the image, or I'm going to be in that third of the image. Now, after you place me, there are other things that are going to come into play, whether I'm leaning back, whether I'm leaning forward, if I'm standing up, down, if you crop down on my head, and all of those things change how people feel when they see an image. There's nothing wrong, for example, I had an editor who used to, an editorial editor, he used to hate when I would try to publish images with the head kind of cropped, right? Because they just thought there should always be headroom. But cropping the head down applies pressure that makes people look in the direction that the head is going in. That makes it, you know, but still, if you crop the head down and the person is in the center of the image, that's kind of boring. But if they're over to 1/3, one side, so 2/3 of the image is in the other place, and the head is cropped down and they're looking, now you get this sense of travel, you get this sense of direction that you don't get. Because this field here flattens everything. But as soon as you change it, then you start to get other things that come into play that make the image more dynamic. So that's what the rule of thirds helps people do in terms of composition. It's really looking at across. It could be looking at up and down too, depending on what the subject is. Whether they're in the upper third, you know, falling, you get the sense of them falling because they're in the upper third and everybody's going this way. You know, if they're bottom third and they're rising up, you get a different sense. Like you often see those images of people who are, you just see the head like this and it's in the bottom third of the picture and you just get that outline of the nose and the lips, and you know that has another effect because it's in the bottom third. So anywhere that you can divide the image into threes, the greater portions of interest is going to be in either third, not in the central, not necessarily in the central part. Does
Are
that
there
help?
other sort of rules of thumb that can help us compose everyday photos? I mean, I remember taking an art photography class when I was in college a gazillion years ago, and there were things like if you had like lines here, they should be reflected here or something.
Well,
Are there other-
yeah, I mentioned it. Yeah, that's another good question. I mentioned that a little earlier, how line impacts people's motion through the image. So if there's a diagonal that's moving to and that diagonal, interestingly enough, it doesn't necessarily have to be you know, like a stick that you put in the image and just point it that way, or somebody's finger doing that, you know, say, look at this. But, right, exactly. It can be very much out of focus, or something that very much is an impression in the background. Now, you mentioned foreground, midground, and background. Those things are affected by your distance when you're talking about this, where you don't have control over aperture. When you have control over aperture in a digital camera, you can make choices about aperture anywhere from, you know, 2, 2.8, 4, 5, 6, 8. Those things affect the depth of field. And the depth of field is the amount of space, distance in front of or behind the subject that is in focus depending on where the subject is. So if you have a low depth of field, and the way to create that with one of these is that you move closer to the person, then you'll have less behind that person in focus, because what you're focusing on is much closer. But as you back up, then all of a sudden you get, you know, the sharp image of the person, but everything else behind them is sharp as well, you know. So being selective about where you take the picture, that brings me back to the keyword that I started this thing with, foot zoom, right? It cures everything. So you foot zoom in on the person, and you get them in a great position, so that you start to eliminate all those elements that otherwise would be distracting, or you render them in a way that helps with the image. So if that diagonal is there in impression as opposed to being something that's distracting, then the eye tends to move that way, and helps to keep people focused on what you want them to focus on. And one of the things you'll get, like, I want to go back to some of these apps, because like this Google-based app called Snapseed is really good for photo editing. You know, and you can tone and you can edit photos there, you know, before you send them off. Then you can use Photogene 2, that exponential 2 there, which that's not a mistake, and that helps you caption your images right on the iPhone, and then send them to, you know, your newspapers. So those things are going to be useful. Once you take the photo, then you can edit the photo, then you can FTP it. But editing the photo for you mostly is going to involve minimal toning and mostly cropping and just getting everything squared away, you know, so that you can send it. So does that
Yeah,
answer
that's
you?
helpful.
Okay, great. Does everybody here, have you heard of Dropbox before? Good idea to get a Dropbox account, because one of the things that I think is going to be helpful about that is that it actually stores your images for you. So you don't have to keep all that space on your iPhone chock full of images. You know, you can actually send those images, leave them on Dropbox, and delete them from your phone. You probably don't run into this so much, but if you run into situations where you are, you know, photographing children, or any place where you need a model release, Easy Release Model Release app is a good app to get. What it does is, I know you guys have used your charge cards and had them hand you the iPhone, especially at the Apple Store, and you sign with your finger. Well, that's what Easy Release does. It's a model release app that you just have the model release right there on your phone, and the model can sign it using their finger. So it's easy for you to get that model release. And talking about video, the same rules apply for video as they do with photo in terms of light. You need a light source, and you need to make sure that that light that you expose for that light source, so that the light source is on the subject, not behind the subject, not over off to the side, but on the subject in a way that allows you to take the video very clearly. The difference, though, here is that you're pretty much only going to be taking video of the subject themselves. You're not going to be able to, unless you want to have a 2 iPhone setup, you know, to get you nodding, you know, and the person talking, you know. Well, maybe you can flip it and do that, you know. But when you're doing those kinds of things, you can, if you don't want to hand hold it, again, use your tripod. And those videos, the video outfits that they sell at Photo Jojo, actually are really, really helpful in terms of you setting up your video. But if you don't want to be handling your phone, then you get your little video outfit, you set it up on your tripod, you frame everything, have the person sitting there, hit the button, and then go to work. There are also booms that they sell, and you'll see those at photojojo.com, boom mics to help enhance the video of your iPhone as well. So there's a lot of good stuff there that won't play. I only chose that. There are a lot of individual vendors, but this is the place where a lot of that stuff comes together. So if you want to spend some money or have your newspapers approve the expenditure, then you can go ahead and do that. Okay? It's about 10 to 5. Does anybody have any other questions?
Going once. Going twice. All right, well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.